All right, so we're diving into dark psychology and lie detection today.
Lots to unpack.
Yeah, you've sent over a ton of articles and research. It's clear that you're ready to, spot a manipulator a mile away.
Absolutely, and you've definitely come to the right place for it. One of the things that I think is really interesting about dark psychology is that it's not just about these, criminal masterminds or villains in a movie, It's about the very real ways that people use psychological tactics in everyday life to subtly influence and control others and, often for their own benefit, not for yours.
Yeah, it's kind of unsettling when you think about it.
Yeah.
How do we even begin to navigate a world where these tactics are being used all around us?
Well, I think awareness is really the key.
Yeah.
And you brought up a good point about wanting to be able to spot these things. Let's take mirroring, for example. Have you ever met someone new and you just instantly feel connected to them, like they just get you?
Mm-hmm.
That might be them, very strategically mirroring your behavior to create that sense of rapport.
Wow.
And it plays on our very natural human desire for connection.
Right.
But with dark psychology, it's not genuine.
Yeah.
It's a very calculated way to gain your trust, lower your defenses, and ultimately make you more susceptible to their influence.
So it's not about being paranoid, it's about being more observant.
Right.
So next time someone's laying on the charm a little thick, it might be time to take a mental step back and ask yourself, are they genuinely interested? Or are they just really good at reflecting back what I want to see?
Exactly. That's a great way to put it. And mirroring is just one tactic.
Right.
Let's talk about something else that I think most of us have experienced. Guilt tripping. That heavy feeling of responsibility for someone else's emotions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that can be a manipulation tactic too. And it plays on our desire to be seen as good, caring people. And it can be surprisingly effective.
Like that sinking feeling in your stomach when someone says, if you really cared about me, instant red flag.
Yes, exactly. Or, they might play the victim, right?
Yeah.
Exaggerate their own suffering to evoke sympathy and make you feel obligated to help, even if it means sacrificing your own needs.
Okay, so we've got mirroring, we've got guilt tripping. What other kind of sneaky tactics are out there that we should be aware of? What about when someone asks for a small favor and then bam, suddenly you're doing them this huge favor? Is there a name for that?
Oh yeah, there is. That, my friend, is the foot in the door technique.
Okay.
And it's a classic manipulation tactic because by getting you to agree to that small, seemingly insignificant request first, they're setting you up to agree to a much larger request later.
It's so true. That's why I always end up agreeing to help friends move, even though I hate moving. It always starts with, can you just hold this one box? And next thing you know, I'm disassembling furniture.
Exactly. And, our brains like to be consistent with our past actions. So that initial yes kind of creates a sense of obligation, making us much more susceptible to those further requests, even if they're significantly bigger than what we initially signed up for.
It's kind of blowing my mind a little bit. It's amazing and a little terrifying how our own minds can be used against us.
It is. But, knowledge is power, and that's why we're talking about this. The more aware we are of these tactics, the better equipped we are to recognize them and resist them. And there's one more tactic that we need to discuss, and it's perhaps the most insidious of them all, gaslighting. And this isn't just about, getting you to do something. It's about manipulating your sense of reality.
Gaslighting. I mean, that one always seems so sinister, but I'll admit, before reading these sources, I wasn't quite sure I understood exactly what it meant. What is it?
Well, and it's often very subtle, at least at first, right?
Mm-hmm.
The gaslighter might deny things that they said or did. They might twist facts, or they might even try to convince you that your memory is faulty.
So the goal is to make you doubt yourself.
Exactly. It's about gradually eroding someone's sense of self
Right.
and their perception of reality, right? Making you feel like, you're overreacting, you're being too sensitive, or even losing your mind, unfortunately.
Wow, that's heavy stuff. And I mean, from what I read, it can be incredibly damaging to the victim.
It absolutely can be, yeah. But recognizing it is the first step. And, we kind of touched on this earlier, but trust your gut. If something feels off, if you feel like your reality is being questioned, don't ignore that feeling. And, one thing that I think is really helpful if you think you might be experiencing gaslighting is documentation. Keep a record of events, dates, times, conversations, anything that seems off or inconsistent. This can help counter the gaslighter's attempts to rewrite history, and it provides concrete evidence to support your own memory and your perceptions.
So it's about regaining that sense of clarity, grounding yourself in your own version of reality.
Precisely. Gaslighting thrives on confusion and self-doubt. So by, staying grounded in your own truth, you can begin to dismantle the gaslighter's power and reclaim your sense of self.
So that's a lot about gaslighting, but it brings up a really interesting point.
Yeah.
If someone IS trying to manipulate us, chances are they're not being totally upfront about it, which means they're lying.
Right.
So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about lie detection.
Okay.
How can we actually spot those lies, like, in real time?
It's funny. Most people are actually terrible liars.
Really?
Yeah, they just are.
Okay, well then how can we hear so much about how good people are at lying and how we're surrounded by deception?
It's true that people lie, and some people are definitely more skilled at it than others.
Right.
But the vast majority of lies are betrayed by subtle cues, leaks in their facade that we can learn to recognize.
Yeah.
The key is knowing what to look for.
Okay, so give us the inside scoop. What are these leaks and how can we spot them? Is it all about, avoiding eye contact and fidgeting?
Well, it's not always that straightforward.
Okay.
Although those can be indicators.
Right.
Remember, someone might be fidgety because they're nervous or uncomfortable.
Right.
Which doesn't necessarily mean they're lying.
Right.
We have to look for clusters of behaviors,
Yeah.
changes from their baseline, and especially inconsistencies between their words and their body language.
So, for example, if someone usually uses a lot of hand gestures, but then suddenly becomes very still when they're discussing a particular topic, that could be a red flag.
Exactly. It could be that their body is trying to suppress a natural behavior.
Interesting.
And that discrepancy can be very telling. And it's not just about what they do, it's also about how they say it. Their tone of voice, their facial expressions, those nonverbal cues can reveal volumes about what's really going on inside.
Okay, speaking of facial expressions,
Yeah.
can you really tell if someone's lying just by looking at their face? Isn't that how those lie detector tests work?
Well, those are a bit more complicated and even controversial in their accuracy.
Right.
But you can glean a lot from facial expressions, particularly micro expressions.
Micro expressions.
These are fleeting, involuntary expressions that flash across our faces for a fraction of a second, revealing our true emotions even if we're trying to conceal them.
A fraction of a second. That's crazy.
It is. How can you even catch that?
It takes practice.
Right.
And a keen eye.
But with training, you can become more attuned to these subtle cues. For example, imagine someone's claiming to be really excited about a new project.
Yeah.
But then they display this fleeting look of disgust. That mismatch, that might indicate that they're not being entirely truthful about their feelings.
So it's like our faces are betraying us even when we don't realize it.
Exactly.
Are there other facial giveaways, things that even an untrained eye could spot?
Absolutely. Liars often overcompensate when they're trying to control their facial expressions.
No.
And this can lead to what we call leaky expressions.
Give us an example.
Okay, so for example, a genuine smile, a real smile,
Yeah.
engages the entire face, including the eyes, the muscles around the eyes, creating those little crinkles we call crow's feet. A fake smile, on the other hand, often only reaches the mouth.
So the saying, the eyes are the window to the soul, is actually true.
Yeah.
They really do reveal so much.
Does it?
Okay, so what about the words people use? Are there any telltale signs of deception in how people talk?
Definitely. Liars often stumble over their words, especially when they're put on the spot or ask unexpected questions. Look for inconsistencies in their story. Do the details change over time?
Right.
Are there gaps or contradictions in their account? Do they use vague language, avoiding specifics, or overusing words like and
Right.
Those could be signs that they're trying to buy time to fabricate a believable narrative.
It's like they're building a house of cards and they're trying to keep it from collapsing.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, any other verbal cues we should listen for?
Yeah, pay attention to what we call distancing language.
Okay.
A liar might refer to someone as that woman instead of using her name, as a way to emotionally distance themselves from the lie.
Oh, that's so interesting. It's like piecing together a puzzle, isn't it?
It is.
You're looking for those subtle inconsistencies in their body language, their facial expressions, their words, to try to get a clearer picture of the truth.
Right.
But what about the digital world?
Yeah.
Is it even possible to spot a liar online when we don't have those nonverbal cues to rely on?
That's a great question. And it's a challenge we all face in this digital age.
Yeah.
We do lose a lot of those telltale signs when we're communicating through text or social media.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that we're totally in the dark. There are still patterns and inconsistencies to look for in their digital footprint.
So how can we be like savvy digital detectives?
Right.
What should we look out for?
Consider their online persona. Does it align with their offline behavior? Are they projecting an overly curated positive image that seems too good to be true?
Yeah.
Those might be red flags.
Okay.
Also, look for inconsistencies in their stories or timelines, contradictions between their public and private personas, or the use of multiple accounts to create different, often conflicting versions of themselves.
So even though we can't rely on those nonverbal cues online, we can still be astute observers by looking for those digital breadcrumbs of deception.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
And it brings up a really important point about protecting ourselves from manipulation and deception, both on and offline.
It's a lot to take in, right?
Yeah.
It can feel kind of overwhelming.
It can.
Like, do we need to be constantly on guard against all this stuff? But I mean, if we can't catch every little lie or manipulation, what's the best way to protect ourselves?
Yeah, you're right. It's not about, becoming like a walking lie detector or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's more about awareness.
Okay.
It's about fine-tuning your instincts, using your judgment. It's like, anything else. The more you understand the nuances,
Right.
the better equipped you are to kind of navigate those situations.
So instead of trying to spot every little thing, it's about being more discerning overall.
Exactly.
Okay.
Trust your gut if something feels off.
Right.
If someone's words don't match their actions, or if the situation seems too good to be true, those are your cues to pause, really assess what's happening.
So trust your instincts, but verify.
Yeah.
Are there any other practical strategies we can use in those moments when something feels a bit off?
Yeah, don't be afraid to ask questions.
Okay.
Lots of them.
Okay.
Manipulators and liars, they often rely on vagueness and deflection,
Right.
pressing for specifics, pinning them down on details that can either solidify their story or it can expose those inconsistencies.
So it's about shining a light on those inconsistencies.
Exactly.
Forcing them out into the open.
Yeah, and remember what we talked about earlier about, seeking multiple perspectives?
Right.
That's crucial, right? Don't rely on a single source of information, especially for important decisions. Talk to different people, explore different viewpoints, gather information from a variety of sources. It not only gives you a more balanced view, but it also makes it much harder for someone to control the narrative.
It's about taking control of your own information intake.
Yes.
Being an active participant rather than a passive receiver.
Precisely. And that's really the key takeaway from all of this.
Yeah.
Knowledge is power. The more you understand about these tactics, these subtle cues, the ways in which manipulation can weave itself into our interactions,
Right.
the less susceptible you become to its influence.
This deep dive has been fascinating.
It has.
And I'll admit, a little unnerving.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I think it's empowering.
Yeah.
It's like we've been given this behind-the-scenes look at how manipulation works.
Right.
And now we have a better understanding of the stagecraft involved.
I think that's a great way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And remember, this isn't about becoming cynical or distrusting of everyone you meet.
Right.
It's about being informed, being aware, and trusting your own judgment.
Well said. So to our listener out there who is now armed with all of this new knowledge about dark psychology and lie detection, trust your gut, stay curious, and never stop questioning. Until next time on The Deep Dive.